Good afternoon or good morning. My name is Mark Budd. I'm a solutions consultant here with CMIC. Today I'm also going to be joined by Nitin Fadnis, our product marketing manager, who's going to help me manage some of our Q&A following today's presentation. So what we're going to do is get started here. To kick us off, I just have a short PowerPoint presentation to kind of take us through, introduce the topic today. What are we actually going to be talking about when we talk about understanding the sources of profit fade to preserve and expand your margins? So for anyone who just joined us in the last minute, my name is Mark Budd. I'm a solution consultant here with CMIC, and I'm going to be taking us through our presentation today. So I decided to start off our presentation with a quote. They say always start with a quote, and the quote is, "Profitability is coming from productivity, efficiency, management, austerity, and the way to manage the business." And this is a quote from Carlos Slim. The reason I thought this might be appropriate for our starting point today is that profitability doesn't come down to one specific process or one specific reporting option. It comes down to a combination of various processes coming together in order to end up at that forecast or end up at that profitability reporting or that gain fade analysis. Our agenda for today is to do a brief overview of some of the common causes of inaccurate profit calculation, a brief overview of who CMIC is and where we fit into the marketplace. And then we're going to go through our goals for this session. And the bulk of today's presentation is going to be a live demonstration of some of these solutions around fixing some of these causes of the inaccurate profit calculation. So just moving on to my next slide here. What are some common causes of inaccurate profit calculation or fade here? And this list could be 20 different items. I've selected 5 different items for our demonstration and our presentation today. So just starting us off, we have untimely or inaccurate allocation of cost to projects. So whether that's accounts payable invoice routing, whether that's equipment costs, whether that's labor costs, either inaccurate coding to our projects or inaccurate amounts and inaccurate rates being charged to our projects as well. That is a big starting point here. The second item is kind of linked to our first item here, but it's specifically delays in allocation of labor costs. So for any of our self-performing or specialty contractors that may be on the presentation today, that's a big one and something that would need to be addressed. So we have delays in getting that labor cost into our cost reporting, so we can't make those timely decisions. Missing or inaccurate change orders. So I'm sure there's some folks on the call here who have had the situation where they didn't find that change order till the end of the project. We didn't end up billing for that change order, and therefore our forecasts were inaccurate. Our calculations of profit have been inaccurate throughout the project as well. Manual billing preparation. So I'm sure there's some folks out there that are managing their billings in Excel. We're printing out cost reports. We're manually updating that percent complete or making those different adjustments. In doing so, we open ourselves up to some risk of having some, just simply fat fingering some values in, or missing, again, some different cost amounts or some change orders as well in that process. And then lastly, kind of the ending point of this, where we're going to be forecasting out on our cost to complete, on our profit here, our forecasting using unreliable or conflicting data sources. So again, I'm sure there's some folks on this call that get together with their team. We're tying together 3 or 4 different reports. We don't have a single source of truth or a single consolidated report that gives me an accurate depiction of the project. So who is CMIC? So CMIC is a single database platform designed to manage construction projects from cradle to grave. So everything from field reporting, collecting daily journals, checklists, drawing management, through project controls, managing commitments, changes, billing, job costing, all the way to our back-end financials and our GL APAR. This would also include everything from payroll to full asset management. So asset management is our inventory, our equipment costing, and our various additional items. Different contractors will have different use for each of these different business areas, depending on where they would fit in the supply chain. This last slide here is really around our specific topic for today, which is everything leading up to the point of our forecasting, our reporting, and how we're going to use those reports in order to make informed decisions. So on the left of my PowerPoint here, you can see that I have my inputs. So we're collecting timesheets and productivity from the field up top here. We're collecting changes, whether it's changes being generated from the field or in the back office, and we're getting a correct calculation of our markups here. We have our financial transactions, so we're having our AP invoices, our committed costs, a good understanding of our cash in and outflows here. This is now bringing me forward to my forecast, the ability to do cost and revenue forecasting, forecast out on my overhead, forecast out on my units and productivity, and my labor to now give me an accurate depiction of my projected profit on the project. From here, we have our output. So what do I want from a reporting perspective? Well, we want to look at this on a dashboard, a customized report, different visualizations, being able to look at my key KPIs on the project and be able to potentially work towards a gain fade analysis and my revenue recognition, my WIP adjustments here as well. So what are we really going to be covering today? How are we going to address some of these issues that I brought up in my opening slide here? Well, I'm going to go through and we're going to have a different area to address in the actual software product as we go through this presentation. So for my top point here, we're going to be addressing this through an automated accounts payable workflow. So we're going to have timely and accurate cost hitting the project through that streamlined workflow and accurate allocation. For my delays in the allocation of labor costs, we're going to talk about allocating labor costs before we're processing payroll. So we don't have a week or a 2 week or a longer delay when trying to allocate labor costs to the project. Missing and inaccurate change orders, we're going to record changes as they happen. So whether that's from the field, whether that's from the back office, we're going to be able to have a starting point on those changes and make sure we capture those, particularly in the billing and forecasting process. We're going to automate the calculation of our progress billings, allow us to get a true understanding of our cost and revenue on each of those SOV line items as well. And lastly, we're going to be generating the forecast from a single database. So we're not going to be tying together multiple different reports in order to generate that forecast. We're going to let the single database do the work for us and bring everything together for us in a single screen. So now I'm going to just remove this PowerPoint for a moment, and we're going to jump into our live product. So the rest of this this presentation is going to be done in CMIC in our live product here. So what I'm going to do is just give a brief introduction to what you're looking at here, and then we're going to dive right into that first topic of accounts payable invoice routing. So this is an example of what CMIC can look like at login, and in my case, I'm showing you our public cloud deployment. So we have, in order to log in, all I needed was an internet connection and any browser, whether that's Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, it doesn't matter. The general structure you see is a menu on the left, some different tabs along the top, and a dashboard right in the middle here. These dashboarding tools will work towards for the ending of the presentation, but these are all configurable for individual users, for roles within our business, and system-wide as well. And this menu structure can always be geared down to just the items that are maybe pertain to my specific role. So just kind of laying the groundwork of where we're at prior to just jumping right into that accounts payable invoice routing process. At this stage, we have a project in place and I have a budget in place as well. So when I go and I open up my budget here, we're going to see that I'm just entering in my job up top, and then down below my budget is populating. So I have this broken out by cost coding category. I have a cost budget and a revenue budget. So project is in place, budget is in place, and we have commitments in place as well at this stage. So CMIC allows you, just as any other construction management system out there would allow you to go in and enter in accounts payable invoices, whether they're related to commitments, subcontracts, purchase orders, or whether they are non-committed invoices. You can enter that directly in the system. What I want to highlight today, though, is the challenge that a lot of folks face, where we may be still using kind of our paper methods. We're putting those invoices in a folder, we're leaving them on someone's desk. That gets buried by a bunch of stuff, and now we didn't get those back in order to make sure that when we turn around and we build on the project, those costs were accurately entered in. So taking a step back out of the system, I'm actually going to pop open my email to kind of kick us off today. So let me drag and drop this in place. What you're going to notice when I drag and drop my email in place is that I have a plugin sitting on the right, and this is CMIC's Enterprise Content Management. The best way to think about this is it's just a portal into the database. It's a way for me to drag documents and communications in my projects, as well as a way for me to drag and drop accounts payable invoices. So my example workflow today is that we've received an invoice via email to accounts payable. I'm going to do some initial coding, and then we're going to push this to someone on the operations team in order to approve this invoice prior to posting. And we're going to show how streamlined that workflow can be. So when I open up my enterprise documents, we have some different folders to choose from for the type of invoice I'm dealing with, but I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop this into a folder. That folder is going to open up for me. So we're bringing that into the database, that image, and I'll double click on that. And that's going to bring me into CMIC's image manager. In the image manager, I have the image on the bottom left here, and where I'm going to enter in some data related to the image on the right. I can toggle this back and forth. I want to look at this a little bit larger, but I'm going to kind of quickly hurry us along and enter in some data. So I'm entering in the job. I'm going to enter in the vendor here. I'm going to select a contract this relates to. So this happens to be an invoice related to a commitment. I'm going to select that commitment and finish out some quick data entry here. So as I do this, I'll add a description. The important piece in this process is that I have a workflow established, and my workflow is based off the job. So in my example, I'm routing this to the project manager that's responsible for the job as an example. When I go ahead and save this, we're going to see that commitment populate on screen. So someone on the operations team has already set up this commitment, and now I'm just simply applying amounts across these different line items, or I'm leaving this for someone on the operations team, the approver, to go ahead and do so. And I'm also getting a good snapshot of compliance. So what is compliance? Well, certificates of insurance, W-9s, whether the contract was signed and executed. I can visualize that right from my accounts payable invoice entry screen here. The yeses on the left are telling me we're good to go, everything's good here. If I had a no here, we might have a payment hold on this specific payable because we're waiting for that outstanding documentation. I'm happy with this. I'm ready to push this along for approval. I'm going to hit submit up top here. By submitting this, I kick off my workflow. So down at the bottom, we're going to see that I'm the submitter. I'm also the approver. The tracking information is, where does it sit right now? Well, it's sitting in my inbox waiting for my approval. Now I'm changing hats. I'm no longer in accounting. I'm the approver. I'm the project manager in my example. Where do I go find this? Well, it's sitting in my workflow waiting for my approval, and I have a central hub for all of my approval items listed out down below. Over on the right, I get a snapshot of everything that was entered in, and then I have some options up top. So I can approve it. That's going to make it available to go ahead and post. I can reject it. If I reject it, I have to leave a comment, outline why I'm rejecting it, or I can go ahead and view this as well. So a really simple way to be able to go ahead and approve these invoices, different notifications available within the database, as well as the availability of some reminder emails as well. So being able to see those emails come in as well. And I'm just going to quickly reflect something up on screen here. Another option to make sure that we have a streamlined approval process would be to have the ability to approve from a mobile application. So just dragging my phone on screen here, now I can have all that same control. I can pull up that invoice, I can view it here, and I can go ahead and actually approve or reject it at this stage. Once it's approved, that might go to somebody else in the workflow, but really we're getting to the point where we're going to post that so we have a good visibility over the allocation of the invoice, as well as the streamlined approval to make sure that we are accurately accurately getting our costs in a timely manner as well. So let's just take this off screen and do a little bit of a reset. So that would be our first process, where we're showing one way to ensure timely allocation of cost to projects. The second point I had for today is really around labor costs. So this might be more specific to our self-performers out there who are a little bit more concerned with labor costs. That tends to be now the bulk of our cost to the project. So the first part of this is to talk about rates. How are we going to cost to the project effectively prior to processing payroll? So to give an example of this, I'm just going to pop down in my menu and we'll just open up a simple rate table. So in my menu, I have different ways I can specify these rates. It could always be job specific. I'm going to choose one that's really simple to look at for today. And this is a rate table that's built out by different trade. So if I click on this line item, we can see down at the bottom, I'm looking at a project superintendent. So we can see that I have a pay rate and I also have a charge out rate. Well, what's the difference here? Well, the pay rate may be what I'm actually going to be paying the employee, assuming that I'm processing payroll in-house in this case. But the charge out rate can be what I can use to cost to the project on a daily basis if I wanted to, or on a weekly basis, depending on how often I want to get that cost in place. So often CMIC customers may use this to uplift that pay rate. Maybe they're just going to use a blended rate for burden as an example. But the point of this charge out rate is it gives me the flexibility to now post timesheets as often as I want to, update labor costs as quickly as possible in order to make those decisions. The other side of this conversation is a really easy way to collect time from the field. So to do this, I'm going to reflect this up again, and this just takes me a quick second. So I'm just going to drag in my time entry. So whether my time collection should be by individual or what I'm going to show today, which is by crew, I have a few different options here. So this is a crew timesheet entry, a really simple application in order for folks to be able to log in, whether it's a foreman or a crew leader, and be able to enter time for behalf of that crew prior to sending that in for approval. Okay, so getting back into this application, I have a crew along the left, I have a responsible person up top, and I'm entering time for Monday. We can see I can easily select my allocation, so which cost code category I want to charge my time to. I have these different options up top, so just clicking into these different columns. Bringing this down, if I want to enter time for an individual, I can always go ahead. I'm just noticing I'm getting a little bit of delay in my screen share. Let's just pull this up. And I always have the ability now to enter time for an individual. So in this case, I'm just entering time for Frederick. I can see any his trade as well as any union considerations. I can also add in equipment time. So reaching back to that asset management and that equipment costing module that is also available. If I bring this down for a moment, I could also enter time for multiple individuals. A key component of this application as well would be the ability to enter in production. So we're capturing both time and production here. When we get to our forecasting topic, we're going to be able to tie those all together to do some productivity forecasting on the project as well. Always have the ability to add and remove folks from crews. From this application, we may go through a workflow process for approval where I will submit this time. Potentially it's going to a superintendent, potentially it's going to a project manager prior to posting. When I post time that I've collected from this application, I will effectively have updated job cost at that charge out rate. So some different options there as well. So let's take this off screen. So we're going to be addressing some of our change order considerations when we actually go through the forecasting process. Another one of the points I made in my opening that's important is the ability to automate the billing process. So how can we automate the billing process using a tool like CMIC? So if I go in to my budget again here, and I'm going to pull up that same job that I opened up with, I have the ability to look at this budget, and it's broken out by cost coding category, but you'll also notice the ability to create a contract from here. That's creating a billing contract. That's creating an SOB for the owner or the GC, depending on where I sit in the supply chain, automatically from my budget. So if I hit create contract here, the system's congratulating me on creating the contract. Well, why would this be important for our discussion today? Well, really, and I'm going to kind of slow myself down here to make sure that I bring up a good visualization for us to have a look at. Really what we're looking at here when I created this contract is I have a header up top here, but the important piece is that schedule values that I've created down below. So what I've done by clicking create contract for my budget is I've naturally linked my costs to my billings. For any of my fixed price or lump sum contracts, is this maybe the appropriate way to go? Maybe not. Maybe we're going to manually create this SOB and we're going to manually update those progress billings. But if I do have a relationship between my billings and my costs in the project, this is a great way to do this. And what's happened is this has created a concatenation of my lowest level cost code, lowest level category. And what this did was it linked my billings and my costs together. It's not what would appear on my invoice to the customer. It's how I want to view things internally. It also allows me to bill differently on a line-by-line basis. So the point of what I'm showing here is that I've created a link between my costs and my billings, and I've therefore created a profit calculation on each of my line items. This pay app code is my internal tracking of that. I will always be able to see that detailed breakdown of my profit. I don't need to look at everything at the job level as an example. And then I have options like these different group codes. So for today, a summary of what group codes do. they'd allow you to then regroup this for what actually needs to appear on the invoice output. The added benefit of automating your progress billings, if I kind of move downstream, and I'm going to kind of cheat here and move across at the top into my progress billings here. So for this, I've opened up my contract. What you'll notice when I'm preparing this billing is now the system's telling me that I have unprepared transactions that exist. So I need to do a calculation to find out what I should be billing for those transactions. If I hit recalculate here, we can have some different options for what I'm looking to capture here based on this date range, as well as the ability to bring in all of my billings from my all of my costs, excuse me, from my previous billing. So I'm going to go ahead and recalculate this, and we'll notice that this is going to disappear for me. So I've naturally created my billing on screen here. Pull that away. So down below now I have a summary, but you'll notice if I click into my pay app code detail, I'll also be able to see at a detailed level what my cost compared to my billing is, and get an understanding of my current profit in this period on a line-by-line basis as well. So a lot of detail pulling in because I've created that basic foundation, that basic structure in order to understand my job at this detailed level. A couple other items to mention that really benefited of a single database and kind of how everything ties together is the ability to drill into my cost transactions. So if I were to click into here, I'd be able to see a listing of different cost transactions that I'm currently billing for, as well as change orders. So change orders have been entered in against the project. I want to make sure that we're capturing all relevant changes on this billing. Well, I can always drill down and see that external or that out of scope change that I want to include on this billing. Different options for what I might want this output to actually look like, whether I want to kind of roll this up or whether I want change orders listed out below the line in more of an AIA format, or if I'm using a custom format. That really comes back to the output, but I've created the foundation in order to generate that accurate billing at this stage. One of the last areas I want to get into for today, and really kind of the nuts and bolts of why I went through all these individual processes, is actually our contract forecasting and being able to pull that all together. So in order to show that, I'm actually going to show a different navigation feature where I'm going to move into a different look where I'm looking at a current project in this case. So I've changed to more of a project manager's look to the project, and I want to focus in on one specific process, which is going to be our forecasting. So when I pull this up, I'm going to pull this up for a single project here, and I'm also going to forecast out on a period. So whether I want to look at this monthly or weekly, depending on the frequency, I have these different options here. Let's just drag my menu out of the way. The first piece you're going to notice in this process is this is everything tying together. So when I brought up that point about forecasting from a single database, this is what this means, is that I'm pulling in everything from my cost budget and my change orders through to my actual costs, through to my revenue projections, my profit projections over on the right here. So if I kind of open up my column up top here, we can see that I'm actually looking at a projected profit at all times on this specific line item level as well. Scrolling back here, from this type of forecast that's interactive, I can always drill down into any of these given items. If I want to drill down into a cost budget as an example, so I want to drill down into my original plus or minus any changes, as well as the ability to drill down into my spent amount. So what has been spent on this project? Is it labor cost? Is it my different AP invoices? So in this case, you can see I have a lot of labor cost on the project, the ability to apply some security here, avoid exposing too much information. So different options to be able to start at more of a summary level and drill down into these specific details. At this stage, what I'm working towards is really a cost to complete over on the right here. So you can see at any point, if I wanted to go ahead and update my cost to complete, I could punch in a value here. But by doing so, I'm adjusting my cost to complete or my projected cost here. I'm effectively affecting my profit. If I go down, if I go back and I want to look at why this change was made, or I want to get a better understanding of the adjustment, I won't know because I went in and I just typed in that number and we just moved on. What I want to do is something like this with this highlighted line where I want to drill into some specific detail and bring this on screen where I have a weather delay in place here. Looks like I can't spell. Let's make an adjustment there, as well as a unit and an amount. And I can really build out the details here so that if I have a reviewer who's coming back to look at this, we're going to know it's a really great way for us to be able to collaborate when getting to this forecast number, which is going to affect my profit. Another option when it comes to forecasting, and again, this might be something that's a little bit more geared towards our specialty contractors or our self-performers out there, is the ability to do some productivity here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little filter and just bring up maybe something that's more specific to some productivity tracking. So let's go ahead and do a filter on this. You'll notice when I drill into this specific line item, this is where we're tracking that productivity, that production in place. So at this stage, I have on the left here some output. We're collecting units, we're collecting time from the field. Where is this going? Well, it's leading back to my reporting and my forecasting, my ability to actually visualize this naturally through this process. So I have my output, which is my units in place, budgeted, complete, and my projection here. And I have my input, labor, cost of labor, my hours that I may be putting in place here as well. Down below, we're seeing a calculation of my productivity as well as my yield. When I'm at this process and I want to get an understanding of, great, we're at this stage, and it looks like from kind of a bird's eye view, everything's going great, but really if I drill down, we're not being very productive. We're behind. Well, what does that mean if I want to kind of catch up here? Well, I can now begin to adjust this to actually adjust my projected cost and my cost to complete as well. So I'm updating this through a productivity standpoint, and then now that's going to back calculate and allow me to get an understanding of, if we want to catch up, what will happen to my profit over the next few periods. So different options with this productivity forecasting as well. Okay. Other items to mention here, if I go ahead and I just get rid of that filter I put on this, and we just open this back up, we may be looking at our change orders. And change orders often can be a kind of a point of contention with how we want to factor this into our productivity, how do we want to factor this into our profit and our cost calculations. If I drill into what is referred to in CMIC as a pending external PCI, that's a pending external change item. That's an out of scope change, change that will affect both cost and revenue, therefore potentially affecting my profit margins. So when I go ahead and I open this up, we can see that I have my change in place here. And then I have my cost budget at risk and a revenue budget at risk. So when you think about this, we maybe have this change that's kind of under dispute. We're arguing that it's out of scope, they're arguing that it's in scope. And from here, I'm not sure which way that argument is going to go. I'm not sure if I'm going to kind of come out on top there, and I may end up eating this cost. How can I begin to forecast that out and get an understanding of my potential profit margin from this change? Well, I can go in and make an adjustment to my revenue at risk. So I can say that we're about 50% sure that we're going to be paid on this change. So then we'll get a calculation of our potential revenue from this specific change item as well. In terms of where we want to go next overall, I always have the ability to store this, kind of lock this in place and pass this on to a reviewer, get ready for that monthly meeting to kind of review this, make sure that we're on track as far as our profit margin is concerned. But I'm also able to then store this data point of my projected profit. So my projected profit is in place. Where does this go? Because now someone just more on the accounting side or on the management side of things just wants to look at this at more of a summary level as an example. Well, what can that look like? Well, a good example, at least of a starting point, would be something like this, where we're going to flow this actually into some revenue recognition and a WIP adjustment here. So from here, we get that full roll up to the job. I've opened this up for a single project here, and we're looking at our current budget. So that's my original plus or minus any changes. My current contract, that's my original plus or minus any changes, as well as my spent, anything we've costed to the job. Spent divided by projected cost is giving me an earned value percentage, which would then be multiplied by my contract to give me this earned revenue amount. The earned revenue compared to my build is going to give me my over under and actually potentially a WIP adjustment number here as well. This value can then just be posted directly to the general ledger. And that's just a little bit of background on some functionality around the WIP adjustment here. But what you're going to notice as well is this calculation of my projected profit. So my projected profit is now flowing into this consolidated view for this specific period. When I post that adjustment, I'll then be able to capture that projected profit as well. And if I want to manipulate this on the job level, I'll have that option. So let's say I want to bring this down and say, you know what does this look like if I make an adjustment here? And we'll notice that my other values are going to be adjusted here as well. Okay, so I want to make sure that I try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so in order to take in any questions here. The last piece I wanted to talk about is reportability. So from my forecast, I can always create customized reports to push out that projected profit, my cost to complete, my projected cost, in order to do any additional analysis, whether I want to look at a gain fade analysis and get an understanding of my fade period to period, or whether I want to look more at specific cost reporting around changes. I'd have these different options to push this out to a template of my choosing. But what can often be more beneficial is a real-time solution. So to show you this, I'm going to pop open CMIC's Analytics. Now, CMIC's Analytics is an analytic tool that allows me to build out not only dashboards, but custom queries and reports as well. So to give some understanding of this, if we look across, we have different reports available in various different modules. Let's talk about something simple. We went through the AP invoice routing process earlier. Well, let's open up a report that's maybe a little bit more geared towards accounts payable invoices. And this is going to pull up a nice query on screen for me as this data populates here. So now I'm looking at AP invoices. I could always look at this by job. From here, I have the option of dragging a vendor name up to the top as an example. And now I can look at outstanding invoices by vendor. So I want to look at a specific vendor. We'll pull that up. From here, now I could always drill into an image if I wanted to. If there's an image included, I can drill directly down into that as well. Okay. More specific to our topic for today is the ability to then look at project revenue, project cost, and profitability. And whether I want to look at that over different periods, that would always be an option to me. But let's look at things at a kind of an executive view, at a manager view, in order to get an understanding of what I'm talking about. And we'll look at this job cost summary as an example. Keep in mind for everyone on the call, just to kind of reinforce the point, this is an example. When I built this out, I selected the columns I'm looking to appear here in order to display the reporting I'm looking for. These types of reports update in real time. As a transaction goes in, we'll get an update. As a cost transaction goes in, this will update. As soon as we bill, this will update. That forecast is stored. These reports are all updating live for me. So it's not a situation where I need to go hunt and peck for reports within the database. This will always give me the live look at my different projects. This example that you're seeing here has each project broken down into a different line item. So I'm truly seeing this at its top level at a summary view. So I'm bringing in my budgeted cost, budgeted revenue, projected cost. If I wanted additional profit calculations coming in here, I could always have some calculated fields. So a calculation does not exist within the single database that is maybe unique to me that I like to look at as far as a KPI or a ratio. I could build that into a column in a report like this. When I drill down into a specific job, so I look at this and I say, well, that profit looks like it's beginning to fade, or I feel like we need to get a better understanding of why my costs have increased period over period, I can always drill down into that specific project. Now I'm just drilling down into that work breakdown structure to get a better understanding here. And I'm just going a little bit further. And now I'm all the way down to a transaction level detail. So going from a report that's telling me some basic summary profitability around a project, all the way down through where we're actually either falling behind or we're making some gains in the work breakdown structure, and then being able to drill down to those specific transactions that may be causing that effect as well. Okay. So I'm going to take a brief pause from the system here, and I'm going to pull back up my PowerPoint. So we've scheduled some Q&A to follow this. I know those were several different topics to touch on kind of in quick succession, so there may be some questions out there. So there are some questions, and Nitin, if you want to pop in, I believe we're taking questions in the chat, and I think Nitin will be reading them out for the group as well.
Sure. Thank you, Mark, and hope you can hear me.
I can, yes.
All right. Thank you. Yes. So a few questions did come in, while you were presenting. The first one is, does CMIC provide capabilities to manage the costs associated with materials procurement?
Yes. Yeah. So there is when I went through the AP invoice writing process, I very much was focusing kind of on subcontracts specifically, but there is a procurement and purchase order module as well. So everything from, and I'll pull back up my screen for a moment. So everything, whether I want to start this at a bid and procurement stage where I want to send out bid packages, invitations to bid, receive those bids back, and do an analysis, that is available to me, as well as a full purchase order, requisition, and inventory module as well.
Thank you. The next question is, this is something that you presented during the opening part of the webinar about pay rates versus the charging rates. So the question is, when you're talking about pay rates versus charging rates, where does the delta actually go?
Was the question, where does the data actually go?
Where does the delta? I think the question is the delta, the difference. Where does the difference go?
Oh, the difference between the pay rate and the charge rate. There is some functionality around where you want that delta to be attributed. So there's also the possibility that you may want to true up, so to speak, that labor cost at the point of actually processing payroll. So that charge out rate sits as a kind of a placeholder or a filler for the time being in order to have the most possible accuracy when it comes to those labor rates, and then that can be backfilled by the actual pay rate when you process the payment to the employee. As far as where the delta goes, it's really kind of defining whether that delta should be attributed to a specific GL account or whether you want to make an adjustment on the job. You do have different options. So I hope that's not too kind of vague of an answer, but it would be something to kind of do a little bit more in-depth demonstration to show kind of the posting process as we go through both the posting of job costs and the posting of processing payroll.
Okay, the next question is, I don't see projections by month. This person is asking, is there a way to see what the projections are month by month going forward, and also like quarterly totals? Also, how do you project a curve in work in place where some months are anticipated to be heavy and others are light? And I know this is a bit of a long question, so if you want me to repeat, I can do that.
Yeah, you're correct that when I was showing you this, I was showing you from a month-by-month basis in the forecasting screen. Excuse me. So if I wanted to my forecast here by month, I would adjust the period in order to do so. The ability to kind of have from the forecast and to be able to just go in kind of a straight projection by month is not something that currently is available in my example. However, from a reporting standpoint, I could absolutely do so. It would just be me more going from month to month in order to adjust that forecast, just adjusting this period up top. Can you repeat the second part of the question for me, Nitin?
Yes. So, how do you project a curve in work in place where some months are anticipated to be heavy and others might be light?
Sure. So you can predict that curve using various spread rules within the system. So a spread rule would be something like a bell curve or a kind of a standard curve within the system. From there, you have, and I'm just trying to kind of pull a few things up on the fly here. So I hope whoever asked me that question doesn't mind me kind of bouncing around a little bit. And I'm going to show you this in one place that's just kind of easy for our conversation today with this format. But I can have a phased budget and a phased projection as well. So this is just a kind of an easy way to show this, where I do have a spread rule in place. I believe in this case I have a bell curve, so we can see that, for example, on my budget or whether it's on my projection, we're actually seeing that adjustment over time based off that curve. The ability to then report on that, whether it's through a visual curve in the dashboard and an analytic tool, would be available to me, as well as to bring that to that analytic report I talked about at the end.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is on open book jobs. The billing rate can be much different than the pay rate. And can this be accomplished when doing the rec to the owner?
Correct. So I focused on a difference between cost rate to the job and pay rate to the employee. But there, you might have noticed on that screen there was a third rate that was also in place. Often that billing rate, let me back myself up a little bit. That cost rate will all be somewhat standard. We're not really changing that from project to project. You absolutely could if you wanted to, but what might be changing from project to project is what we're actually billing the customer themselves. So what we would use is potentially actually setting this up outside of the pay rate versus charge out rate, and maybe setting up something like this, which is more of a billing rate table where we can capture multiple different rates and apply this to a specific job or to a specific customer. So to give you a very brief example here, I have my standard table up top here, and then down below, if I just scroll down, this can be a little bit jarring at a glance, just again in this format, but I have these different trades here. So this is my trade column where I have an equipment operator as an example, and now I can apply a billing rate that would then be specifically applied to the job. So there really are three possible rates: the pay rate, the cost rate to the job, as well as potentially the billing rate as well.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So there are two questions on CMIC Analytics. The first one is, what tree view is CMIC Analytics under? And a related one is, how do we access CMIC Analytics?
So to guess that one of those questions is coming from a current client. So what I would suggest is just to reach out and put in a ticket, and our support team will be able to set that up. I can follow up with an email as well, just kind of giving you some screenshots to point this out. But that's probably the best way to go about answering that question. So if we could maybe just collect those names, and I'll follow up following the webinar.
All right. And what tree view is CMIC Analytics under?
Yeah.
So again, is that as a related question about? Okay.
Both those questions are related, so if we can get both those names, I'll follow up.
Okay. And the final question is, we can't access enter budget command once a job is started. Can we not adjust the curve once the job is actually already started?
That's a good question. Again, obviously, kind of a current client on that one. Maybe let's collect that name and follow up on that one as well. I haven't really, off the top of my head, kind of played around with what would happen if I do hit that start job. So I'll actually check out myself. I just want to make sure I give you a good answer on that. So let's maybe take that away as well.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And we are right on the hour. So thank you for that wonderful presentation and demo about the capabilities of the CMIC platform. And just for the audience of our benefit, this webinar has been recorded, and a copy of the recording will be made available to all the attendants and the registrants in a follow-up email communication shortly. So stay tuned for that. We thank you for making it to today's webinar, and we hope that it was a very good investment of your time. Hopefully, you were able to understand some of the deeper capabilities of our platform a little better. Please reach out to us if you have any additional questions or if you want to know more about our platform. Again, thank you for attending, and have a very nice day ahead. Bye-bye.